I'm Steve from Fife College. I'm one of 8 people in our team that look after the learning hubs and the learning systems over in Dunfermline, Kirkcaldy and in Glenrothes. So I've been Moodling for about 4 years or so. And we are using web services at Fife College. We use about 60 individual calls to web services. Just a quick, is anyone using web services? Great. Okay, so that's great. I've tried to keep this as simple as possible. So web services allow you to write programs that remotely contact Moodle via the internet, and those services can either read data or update data. So this is an alternative way of working with Moodle. Normally, or we generally used to write Microsoft SQL scripts or write plugins, but web services are an additional way of contacting the database. So they're useful when you can't solve a problem, say using Moodle custom reports, Moodle exports, or bulk updates. So the reason Fife are using them is because we've got some data in our student record system, some data in Moodle, and we need to integrate that and do something with it. So we need something that can read 2 databases at the same time, essentially. So we found web services was a good way of doing it. You can use a wide range of programming languages, but using web services, you do need to have some programming experience. Security does need to be carefully considered because Moodle web services aren't sitting inside Moodle. They are on the internet. So anyone that can write a Moodle web services program with a valid way of connecting can update your database unless you've got security in mind. So I'll cover some of those things as we go through. So I'm going to just try and flick to a quick demo, live demo of all things. This is Python. This is a little server I run. It's running Python. So I'm just going to show you the program and then run it. So hopefully everyone can see that. There's 2 things going. Well, the 2 things at the beginning. This first line here is just pulling in some magic that we've got that just handles all the heavy lifting, does all of the thing. It makes the Moodle program crisper because we only have to concentrate on the things which are important to what we're doing. That first line handles a lot of the authentication and so on and so forth. The next line is what's called a web service token. So this token is the key to using web services. If this token gets into somebody else's hands, you're in trouble. So these things have to be kept nice and safe and secure, and putting them into a program like that is a really bad idea. But this is the demo, so bear with me. I'll go through tokens in a bit more detail in a moment. The next thing the program does is establishes the connection to Moodle, and then this is what we're asking Moodle to do. We're asking it to call a module called core users create users, and we're going to send it some parameters: a username, how we want to authenticate, manual, a password, a first name, a last name, an email, and a city, and then we're going to print the response. So let's try and run that. So anyone around the world could run this if they had the token. So that will be a full stop then. And we have a programming error, which is fantastic. So we'll just fix that.
With your AI to fix it for you.
Oh, he's busy. That'll be an extra close brackets there. Let's go again. That's better. So that's going to make a connection to Moodle, and it has just inserted a user called SMUG user1 with an ID of 1017. I won't go to the database, but trust me, it's there. So if I run it again, hopefully I'll get an error because we should have a duplicate username. Let's try that. So there you go. Web services has crashed, or the Python module has crashed and said, I can't do this. So when you're writing these programs, you need to consider how you're going to handle exceptions. But that's a very quick demo. Let's head back to the slides. So quickly, how this works. What you saw there was the bottom of the screen. So we had a token, that was the random value. We wrote a program running anywhere on the internet, and we went through the internet and updated one of my sandboxes, and you saw that happening. So to get a token in Moodle, you need to define what's called a custom external service. That determines what can be done with that token and who can do it. I'm not going to show you all of that today, but that then, if it then drops back, and you have to define users and roles as well. So if I just move the slides on. So web services APIs can read or update the Moodle database. There are several hundred available. If you go into Moodle server admin, you'll see them all. So for example, you can add a user, list enrollments, unenroll a student, even send an instant message, or even upload a file, in fact. The APIs are actually really well documented, but not everything you can do in Moodle has an API. You'll discover this when you try and write something with web services. You get 90% of the way there, and you discover that there's no API maybe to update a particular part of the course. It's just the way the game works. So at Fife, we have to define this thing called a custom external service. And what we've chosen to do is we've set up several services depending on what the program is doing. And that allows us to give each token a unique set of things it can do and capabilities that it's got. As I said before, web services are good because they actually do obey Moodle's access control system. So you still have to set up users, you still have to set up roles, you still have to set up capabilities. However, defining minimum capabilities is a bit frustrating, to say the least. So this is one of the learning curves when you're working with web services. If you want to just set something up with the minimum, it's quite a lot of work, because it will fail and fail and fail because maybe it doesn't have the capability, or because you've got or because you've not got some other config set. However, once it's working, it's great. Access control tokens are how web services communicates with your program. So if a token falls into the wrong hands, then your database is effectively compromised. Web services do not use passwords, Active Directories, single sign-on, or multi-factor authentication. All of that is out of the window. All you need is a token. Any Moodle administrator can create a token, and the whole process of issuing them, sharing them, storing them, and canceling them, you need to think about that very carefully. Because, as I say, if tokens get into the wrong hand, then you've got a real mess on your hands. For the sake of time, Kenji, I'll skip on the next part of the demo. I have a little program that it actually takes an existing course and copies it and makes new copies out of it. So at Fife, at the beginning of each year, we have to create about 800 templated courses, and we use web services. We set the template and we iterate around the student records database, find out what's running, and then we create a homepage for every single one of those courses. Doing that by hand would take forever. So using web services, that's fantastic, because we can get data from another database that isn't Moodle, integrate it, pick up the template, and automatically create the Moodle courses. It works really well. As I say, it runs about 800 courses get created in the space of about 10 minutes. From a programming perspective, as I say, you can use any programming languages that will support web services. That's pretty much everything as far as I know. Maybe Basic doesn't, but even then, Visual Basic probably does. JavaScript probably does if you want to use that. But pretty much anything can write to web services. We also manage all of our code using Git. So there are advantages because Moodle Web Services isn't part of Moodle, but the disadvantage is you've got a configuration manager to look after your code independently and make sure it's in line with what's going on in Moodle. This is not like installing a plugin and it telling you that it's not working. So, as I say, we wrote what I would call the helper module. That first line of the program does a heck of a lot of work to actually make all the connections and make sure that errors are handled properly. So we wrote a little wrapper in Python and in PHP to do that. if anyone's interested, I'm probably happy to talk about that separately. Be aware, web services are really slow compared to a plugin or a direct SQL update, probably 10,000 times slower. So we run a job every night to check our enrollments. Our students enrolled in Moodle correspond to what's enrolled in our student record system. That takes about 20 minutes to run through. If that was written in a compiled language directly talking to the database, it would probably do it in about 20 seconds. It doesn't bother us because 20 minutes overnight is not a great cost, but do be aware they are very, very slow. And also, another thing to be aware of is that sometimes these API requests just fail because it's the internet. And when you're programming, you need to work out what's going to happen if this call has failed. It's the same as when you load a web page and it doesn't load. You have to press F5. Sometimes that happens with web services. It just needs to be part of the game. So just be aware that they're not guaranteed to work. They work most of the time, but sometimes you ask it to add a student to a group and it just doesn't do it. And then you run it again and it does do it. So that's just the way it works. Why do we use them? Because we've got people in our team who know Python, PHP, and infrastructure. And as I said at the beginning, the real reason we're using this is because we're trying to link up systems that are on different architectures. So we've got a student record system running on Microsoft, Linux is running Moodle, and then we've also got to provide some data feeds in CSV format or JSON format into other systems. So web services is a really useful combination for us. It does seem faster to change the programs. So if we had it written as a plugin, it would take a long time for us to get that code accepted into the Moodle database and implemented. We still have to be careful, but because we're not changing the Moodle database, we can turn things around a bit quicker using web services. And also we use web services for some of our housekeeping is done with web services now. So previously we might have written a SQL script. We found it's probably easier because we don't care about performance so much. If we write it as a web service, then it's a bit more documented and a bit more managed and controlled. And finally, the other great thing with web services so far is that when we've upgraded Moodle, they generally behave themselves and still did what they used to do. Still no excuse for testing, not testing, but we do find because they're part of core, they don't really do random things after update. Where do we use them? We add Moodle users from this. Our student record system contains our students. Every day we check whether Moodle has got all the students in it. If it hasn't, we add them. We automatically enroll all of our students into their course of work. We'll talk about that separately another day, Kenji. It's almost as exciting as a trip to the dentist, but if you really want me to talk about it, I'll talk about it. We have an e-portfolio system which connects to Moodle to look up student names and their role in Moodle. So we didn't want to duplicate the data in our WordPress system. So on the fly, when the student logs in, we head across to Moodle, pick up their name and their role, and then we can use that in another system. Our end of year tasks and start of year tasks have said we're creating 800 courses using this. And we also extract data in CSV form, typically course completion data. We export that into other systems. Quick thoughts on security. When you're creating a token, you can lock it to a specific IP address. This is probably the #1 way of stopping web services getting into the wrong hands. So that token I had earlier on, I can link that to a very specific IP address. And if an attacker comes in on a different IP address, they won't be able to use that token. Don't store the tokens in the programs like I did just then. You can expire them. Be careful when you're sharing them. By email is probably a bad idea, but a deletable instant message is probably the best way, or writing them on a bit of paper and typing them back in again. You need to make your Moodle admins aware that token security is really important and not to just go randomly creating tokens and dishing them out. We separated all of our functions into separate areas within web services. That makes it a bit easier to manage them and control access. We also try and minimize the capabilities and of each of the tokens. The final thing, if you've got an infrastructure team, get them to have a look at the Nginx logs or the Apache logs and just see if there's anything suspicious coming in on these endpoints. In summary, then, Moodle Web Service is an additional way to read and update the Moodle database. It's not for everyone because it needs planning, programming knowledge, and technical knowledge. The great thing with using web services is that all the activity is logged in the standard Moodle way. It's in the log files, it's in the audit trail, and it's done with a username. So unlike hacking a quick SQL query, which won't have any track in your database, at least using web services, you'll see a record of what happened. They are very, very slow, and that's just the way it is. And they can fail, but they are probably quicker to develop once you've got over the initial learning curve of building your helper functions. And you do need to manage security really closely. Kenji, that's me.
And that's a lot for me to take in. I have to say, we have time for maybe one question.
I think an observation rather than a question, but I think because Moodle's just trying to support its mobile apps so much, almost every function in Moodle's gradually ending up with a web service to drive it. So very soon, I think almost everything will be able to do it through there. And even some of the Moodle stuff, you can get bits of the Moodle UI through a web service. And that.
I didn't know that.
Okay. The Fragments API.
And speed isn't an issue?
It is an issue. It is always going to be slow. And I think there's an interesting trade-off between using a web service versus doing something natively. But I think it's a question that's on an individual decision. It's you speed up between your velocity for doing 6,000 courses in a short amount of time versus something like so. I think that's an individual design perspective.
Okay, right, Steve. As always, thank you so much.
The pleasure is all mine. Thank you very much.